Hey, what's up, everybody? You know what time it is. Your boy Jeffrey L. Boney here for another hot edition of Real Talk Junkies Live, man. So excited to have you join us on today. Make sure you share the link with your friends, your family, your foes. It doesn't matter. Everybody needs to check out this exciting show today because we're talking about something that's extremely important, especially considering that just last year, President Biden signed into law a legendary, historic Juneteenth law. Making Juneteenth an official federal national holiday, and to talk about the origins of Juneteenth and how they have had a major impact on the lives of African Americans, particularly right here in the greater Houston area. I could find no other guests to talk about that than someone that could really speak to the history, the legacy of something that helped to kick off Juneteenth celebrations here in the city of Houston and, of course, across the greater Houston area. And I'm talking about none other than Miss Jacqueline Bostic, McElroy, and Pastor Lou McElroy, pastor of Antioch Missionary Baptist Church. Yes. Now I want to tell y'all something. Just a little, history, brief history. Back in 1872, 4 African American men coming out of slavery came together to pool their dollars together, $1,000 to be exact, to purchase the land that we're sitting on right now. It's called Emancipation Park. And they did it for the purposes of coming together to commemorate Juneteenth and those celebrations and the freedoms that we now as African Americans are able to enjoy. And I'm talking about none other than Reverend Elias Dibble, Richard Brock, Richard Allen, and the great-grandfather of John Henry Jack Yates, sitting here right here, and the great-great-grandfather. And so, wow, man, we're talking about not only you all being descendants of one of the individuals who were responsible for buying this land, and it was actually a great testament to property ownership, coming out of slavery. And so, first of all, let's just talk about what does it mean to you, Ms. Bostic, knowing that, you are part of such a rich legacy?
Well, I think it really means to me that it lets me know, and it should let all of us know, that just because people were enslaved, it did not mean that they did not have the ability to do things and to start a community of their own. Because when they were finally told 2 years after everyone else had been freed that they were freed from slavery, then they developed their own community. They came out of slavery with just the clothes on their backs. They couldn't stay where they had been enslaved unless they wanted to continue to be enslaved, because they were not going to pay them for their labor and their work.
Right.
So it says that these people had knowledge and understanding of what they needed to do as a community to build a community. And so I think we should all be extremely proud of that, because when they bought this land, which was only just a few years after they had come out of being enslaved, there was not another park in the city of Houston. This was the first park. There was not another park in the state of Texas. This was the first park.
Wow.
So we have so much to be thankful for and to be proud of as being citizens of this community and the state of Texas.
Right. And you know what? You being the great-great-granddaughter of John Henry Jack Yates, and like I said, I know there were 4 individuals, but I'm a product of Jack Yates High School, so of course I'm gonna always shout out JY.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think about the fact that we talk about cooperative economics, Park Quans and different other stuff. We talk about the importance of pooling our Black dollars together, and to think that coming out of slavery, of being enslaved, 4 Black men came together with what little money they had and had the foresight to buy this land to celebrate and thinking about the future generations of African Americans. So how does that make you feel legacy-wise?
Proud, honored, grateful to know that they led the community in its efforts, understanding the ability that we have and what we can do when we pull our resources together. I mean, what they did and what they accomplished, probably it was a step in showing everybody we can do this. If we come together, because they didn't have those opportunities prior to that, to emancipation. And so they took the skills that they learned while they did things for others as enslaved people, and they came together to build their community. And they said, we're going to have a place to call our own.
Yeah. And considering that Jack Yates was a minister, reverend.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, he was the first pastor, founding pastor of the church you now pastor.
The Antioch Missionary Baptist Church. Yes.
So you're married into the family, but nonetheless, you're still a part of the family.
Yes.
Not only the Jack Yates family,
yes,
but the family of Antioch and what he built as a legacy. How does this make you feel? Not only, sitting on this hollow ground,
right,
and understanding this history, but being the pastor of the church he founded.
Yes. Well, I serve as the 14th pastor of Antioch. And to know that there were 13 other men who stood and paved the way before me, I stand on their shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Yates, yes, was the first pastor. He set that pace and created that paradigm shift coming out of slavery and establishing our church, Antioch, as the first African-American church in the city. For me, it's such a humbling experience to step into that pulpit every Sunday and to have given the opportunity to preach God's word, having known that so many men and so many women have come together to form a community and a church that lifted the name of Jesus Christ, but also promoted education, self-awareness. When you talk about these four pillars, these four individuals who established this park, I can only think of and be mindful of the community that came behind them and supported them to do that. This was tough when you couldn't get loans and there weren't banking system established for our people coming out of enslavement like we did. So when we look at the four pillars who took the initiative and led the way, I'm mindful of the community that came behind them and supported them in that effort, and even establishing our church 156 years ago.
Wow. And so, speaking of 150 years, Ms. Bostic, I mean, $1,000 was a lot of money at that time, especially from someone coming out of enslavement, as was stated. You serve as the vice chair of the Emancipation Park Conservancy here. And I look at the beautiful edifices around here, but they didn't need all this to celebrate their rich history back then. But it's great to see this. How does this make you feel to see, that this park is still here 150 years later, and that your great grandfather had everything to do with it?
Well, I think, as my daughter said, it makes me feel really proud to think that 150 years later, that we're still able to come and enjoy Emancipation Park. It was here when I was a little girl. It's still here today.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that Jack Yates and the other men had such vision. It took real vision. They didn't need all that we have today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it took real vision to understand that you needed to be empowered enough to have your own land, your own place. And our great-grandfather was not a selfish man. The things that he had an opportunity to be exposed to while enslaved and then out of slavery, he really shared with the community to make sure that the community could survive and that they could be empowered to know how to buy land, to know how to be educated. He did all of those things because he really cared about people and the community. He had a vision. He had a real vision that they as people could have their own community because they had nothing when they left being a slave.
Mm-hmm. I think about the fact that today so many traditions, good traditions and values have been lost along the way, generation after generation, especially coming out of civil rights struggle.
Right.
But I think about the fact that you have families like you all that are still carrying the torch. But what are some things that have been passed on to you all that you gleaned or were passed on from John Henry Jack Yates that you all have implemented in your life? I'll start with you.
Being a servant. First and foremost, as growing up, I can always remember my mother, my grandmother, when she was going to serve other people. That's all I grew up knowing what to do. That it's not about just your efforts, but when you see someone else who needs a hand, you help them.
Mm-hmm.
And you work with the community to make the community better.
Mm-hmm.
And being an advocate for those who may not have a voice,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that their rights are protected.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Ms. Boston? What are some things that you were drilled into you from your mom and parents? You know, from
Well, yeah, from my mom and my grandmother and my great aunt, who were Jack Gates's daughters.
Mm-hmm.
They would always say to us when I was coming up as a child, to much is given, much is required. So that means that you have to be a part of the community and share. It's not about you, it's about everybody. You have to work with other people.
Yeah.
And you learn to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And like my daughter says, she was always with me lots of times when I went to work with other people in groups and do things. And so that became a part of what she knew and understood.
Absolutely.
You know, and same thing, I would go with my mother. So you learn by doing.
Yeah.
And you learn how important the community is and that you're a part of that community. You're not above it, you're not below it, but you're a part of it.
Yes.
So you learn to work with it.
Yes. And you were about to
Work
say
in it.
A funny story. So sometimes when we grow up and our parents teach us things and we say, we're going to make our own path.
Yeah.
So,
do my own
I'm not going to do this. I'm going to take my own path. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and I touched my husband. I said, oh my God, I've become my mother.
She sure did. And where we going? Like what actually triggered that thought?
Just how involved we have been.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm the chair of another organization that she was the chair of, her aunt, her mother, and it's all about service.
Right.
And so it just dawned on me, okay, here I am.
I am my mother.
But it's just what was instilled and ingrained. You know, you teach it, you train a child, and you know, as they grow older, then they won't depart from those things.
Mm.
And if we continue to teach our young, and they need to hear the story of Juneteenth, especially when Texas is removing racial conversations from the classroom.
Yeah, with this false narrative called
with
critical race theory.
Right. Yeah, the distortion of what critical race theory is.
Right.
You have to tell your own narrative.
Yeah.
Because then if you don't tell the narrative, then people become desensitized to the dehumanization that was slavery.
Yeah.
And the struggle that we have experienced even since emancipation. So it's important for us to continue to teach and bring others along the way.
Yeah. Speaking of young people, Pastor Lou, I think about my interns. I had some interns one summer, and we had them do a paper on who am I? Mm-hmm. And to see some of their responses was shocking and startling. As a matter of fact, it made me cry.
Yeah.
Because they really did not know who they were.
Right.
They could not define who they were outside of what they are doing at this point.
Right.
And you know, me and the owner of Forward Times, Karen, we actually were in tears about the lack of awareness, self-awareness,
right.
and historical awareness of who we are as a people outside of, you know, like you say, you know, we were slaves, and that was it. You know? Which, well, I don't even like to say we were slaves. We were enslaved. Like you said,
yes.
that. We were
Yes.
enslaved, not slaves.
Right.
We didn't want to be, you know, in that
Right.
position.
Right.
But you know, talking about the young people, how important and what can we do? You know, I mean, I know sometimes we always say, well, you know, black folks or young people need to get back into church.
Sure.
But they're moving more away from that
Right.
than anything. And
Right.
the more they move away from that, they're moving away from that education and that history
Right.
and that spiritual foundation
Right.
and grounding.
Right.
So how can we shift that?
Well, I believe, you see it at our church at Antioch. We would not be around for 156 years if we did not adapt to the times, the change, and even the culture. Um, Being able to improvise and to stay relevant, right, with your own community, because the community does change. We talked about this false narrative of critical race theory and how damaging it is to our own legacy and our own story, when it should be us who tell it. It's our story. And if we don't tell our story, then we then yield the right to tell that story and give it to others to shape how they want to shape it. I've put a program, actually, it's a tour at Antioch called From Chains to the Church, that talked about that transformation coming from enslaved people. And 7 months after Juneteenth, you have the establishment of this church, who's now standing 156 years, right? To talk about Jack Yates, who was born in 1828, and 38 years later, he's the first pastor of our church. And how does he get from Virginia to Texas? So that's the awareness that we bring to our own church, our own youth, our visitors, this city. That we can't lose that. It's our responsibility. Antioch Church is living history. It's living history. And I invite all your listeners, all of our community, to come down to the church and to live your history, learn your history, because it's right there in right here in our city. So yeah.
Ms. Jackie, how do you think that we need to incorporate our younger people? You mentioned it, but what can we do to ensure that they grab a hold of this history? Because it starts with the family first.
Right.
And we have a broken family structure in many cases. But I mean, how can we?
So I think with any family structure, if you bring them to Antioch, or you bring them here, or you take them out to Freedmanstown where there are various tours, I think it's incumbent of parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents to involve the children. One, in helping to volunteer and to show how we are to be an asset to our community, but then also to come and learn the history of all of these places, and also make it relevant to the child so that they can understand. So if you have a child who aspires to be a politician or attorney and they love to read, well, then let them know what the privilege is that we have to read. Because although Jack Yates had the privilege of learning from the master sons because they were best friends, anybody during that time period, if they were caught, they would be hung, or they could be lynched or shot and killed. So you have to continue to educate them, not just about that time period, but the entire struggle. Why is it important for you to go vote? And understanding the Civil Rights Act, and then understanding the laws that are in place now, which they are trying to turn back the time in, as well as those rights. So parents have to fully engage, and not just February.
My wife and I were up the other night, sitting out back and having this very conversation, as we look as the pastor of Antioch, my wife, First Lady of Antioch, as we think of ahead, and how do we move that needle, being new to this position, but having so many resources of ourselves, and we look at how we were raised, and we look at that history that we have. First and foremost, it's education. And I think over the years, we may have, as a family unit, pushed the responsibility of educating our children of our own history to the school system. When coming out of slavery, it was a verbal history that passed down from generation to generation. That narrative that the family would sit around the dinner table, the breakfast table, right? And talk about history, talk about the day, talk about what went on, has been replaced with social media, video games,
Text message.
text messages, right? And we live in that world. I'm not saying those are bad things, but those are good things. As a
It's
matter
the
of fact,
reality of where we are right now.
we can incorporate those things in telling our story, but we can't move away from the center. And the center is our own verbal communication that we can share with one another. The family sitting together and mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, the youth asking questions of the generations before them about their family. This is a lost art that if we don't, as a people and as a family, learn how to communicate this history of ours internally first. We have to become educated of this history of ours, so then we can then go out and not only broadcast it, but we need to be specific and targeted in how we distribute this information of ours, this legacy of ours, right?
Preach.
You
No, hey, you get on.
no, it's just started, and I'm passionate about this.
It's well, you should be. I
Because
appreciate
it's a conversation. It's a conversation that my wife and I have,
Right.
being blessed in the positions that we are at Antioch, because of this history that we have, because of a rich community in Freedmanstown that we have.
Yeah.
We service an elementary school, and we've adopted that school, and we see the youth. And you talk about that essay paper, and we're looking and watching, and we're trying to figure out how do we pour all of this into these youth. But we can go to the school and do it, but if we're not hitting home base, right, then it's for naught. And we have to figure out a way to get to home base, to get the mothers and fathers, the grandparents involved, and learn and educate them to the degree that we need to.
You know, Ms. Bostic, I think about a couple of, and I'll share all with you. The Arabic Cultural Center is off of Stancliffe, I want to say off of 59 in the Beltway, and the Jewish Community Center. I've been to both of those establishments, and what they teach their youth is the history of their people, and they can go generations and generations back to, you know, I know for me, I can only go up to my great grandfather, but beyond that, I don't have a clue. You know, I'm still searching. I mean, I'm a very resourceful person, but I'm trying. I'm signed up for Ancestry.com and all that stuff. And so I'm finding out, and I'm finding out more and more. And I'm about to do the African Ancestry.com. But my thing is, you know, I sat and I watched, I observed them talk about their history. They talk about, of course, their belief systems, their values, but they also taught them their language. As I'm talking about young 2-3 year olds, they're teaching them how to speak Arabic, and they're reading the from the Torah, and you know, in the Quran in their particular instance, I'm saying, but this is their life, their legacy, their culture, and so, you know, whether you believe in that or not is irrelevant to me. What I'm saying is they're taking the time to impart something into those young people that they believe is important to their history. So, you know, Ms. Bostic, my question to you is, you know, he talked about sitting around the table talking about that. Were there any writings or you know, things that your great grandfather left you that you all were able to glean from, or that you can resort to today?
I don't have any, but with having lived and been around my his daughters, there were a lot of things that I learned, you know, about him and their life, his children, and everything from him. And I think what you're saying, and that Pastor McElroy has said, is all those things are so important. And I've wondered, how do we somehow get our children, because if no one tells them the story, and if anyone tells them the story, it has to be us. It's not somebody else's story. Only we can tell our story. But how do we get our children to sit and learn, like you say, at their different centers? They teach their history. that's, I'm sorry to say, what we need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
No, don't be
we-
sorry.
No.
Yeah, that's what you need to say. Say it like it needs to be said. Say it like it needs to be said.
We don't know our history.
Right, absolutely.
We don't know it, and so therefore, because we don't know it,
Mhm.
we think that we haven't done anything until we came on the scene. That's not
Right.
true.
That's right.
That's not true.
We like we invented the
Right.
We invented the wheel, or we invented the world. We
Right.
did none of that.
Right.
We're standing on the backs of
Right.
men and women who went through horrific living
Mm-hmm.
in order to stay alive.
Mm.
You know, they didn't go around laughing and joking because they were happy to be enslaved.
Right.
They would spend most of their time doing what they had to do to stay alive.
Yeah.
And also trying to figure out, how do I get out of this situation
Yeah.
alive?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
You know, so that took
Alive and together.
Alive.
Right.
Unity.
Right.
There's been a lot of
Alive
separating
and
us.
together. One of the things that I always appreciated about my grandfather's life, and it always concerned me, I know you've heard it all about how Black men don't care about their children, they don't care about their families. And I just said, no, you know, I know that's not true,
Mm-hmm.
because my grandfather, who was enslaved, came out of slavery in Virginia from the slave master who owned him,
Mm-hmm.
but his wife and children were owned on a different plantation.
Mm.
And that owner came to Texas because slaves could come to, people who wanted to continue to enslave people could come to Texas at the time that others were freed in the North, in the
Mhm.
Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to take care of his family. So he went back into slavery
Mm.
in order to be able to take care of his family and came to Texas.
Mhm.
Wow.
So you don't tell me that Black men don't love their families.
That's right.
Yeah.
You don't tell me that Black men don't care about their children,
Right.
because I know
That's right.
that Black men do,
That's
Yeah.
right.
but they have to be in a position to be able to do it.
That's right.
And they have to know that if I do this, it's going to be of value to my wife and my children.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
You know, so I know that we love our families,
Mhm.
women and men, but somehow we've gotten into a habit in these times of thinking everything we see on television and all the movies, all that's glamorous.
Mhm.
And so we should do that too.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just think it's so detrimental to our children when I watch how the system works in terms of divorces and parents divorcing. And I used to help my daughter out, and it just really got to me how children were being taken and pushed from parent to parent, taken from mothers
Like
and
the CBS,
Yeah,
Child Protective Service.
given to fathers who didn't care anything about them. They just didn't want to pay child support.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you watch and you see that and you say, how did we get to this place?
Yeah.
What brought us to this place that we did not understand that when we have a family, we have a responsibility
Mm-hmm.
and that we take care of our families.
And then you think about you talk about systems. You think about to qualify for Section 8 housing,
Right.
you cannot have
A
man in the house.
Mhm.
Right.
And for African Americans, my understanding, it's like that really has been the only group that is negatively been impacted by that.
True.
But why would you want to deny
A father from being
father
with their
for
children.
being with their children,
That's
a
right.
man for being in the house with their kids,
Right.
if you truly are trying to empower the family?
But you're not trying to empower
Right.
everybody.
Right.
Again, if you kind of look at the ways that the laws were written when they decided that they were going to give us the same rights as everybody else,
On paper.
well, even on paper,
Yeah.
but even on paper,
Right. No, I got you.
if you read it all the way to the end,
Yeah.
you can still go to jail from a little of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a matter of empowering you. It was a matter of putting something on paper to get you out of the way so you leave me alone.
Mm.
You're not trying to empower me,
Yeah.
because to be empowered, you've got to have the family structure that works in this country.
Yeah.
And so that's with the husband, wife, and children.
Yeah.
So then you do things that are going to make that happen.
Mm.
But if I'm taking you away from each other and I'm separating you, it's like with my grandfather, but he was determined. He was not going to leave his family, let them go to Texas, and he was going to stay in Virginia where he could have stayed a freed man.
So help me understand this. You're saying that they separated him from his wife and children.
Right.
How many children?
He had, he had really, I think, 11, but not with that, with 10 with the first wife.
Okay, so they separated him, kept him. He was in Virginia,
Mhm.
and they came to Texas.
But he came with them. He went back.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
he was actually a freed,
Yes, he was
Man.
actually a freed man.
and he chose because they remained in slavery,
Right.
or
To go with
enslaved,
them.
to come to Texas
Yes.
to be re-enslaved
Right.
voluntarily.
Right.
And how long did he stay in that situation?
I would say until the
Until June.
until
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth.
Right, until June.
Until
Wow.
Juneteenth.
Wow, that is
Until
such
Juneteenth.
such a powerful yet sobering story, man. About, I mean, what do you think about?
But think about the education or the lesson in that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a law any greater than slavery and what that was.
Yeah.
Because you weren't even human
Mm.
in slavery.
Yeah.
But yet, coming out of slavery, let's not even go to Juneteenth. Let's talk about even while Jackie Yates was still a slave,
Mm-hmm.
to have the forethought, the insight, the resilience, the determination, but also the love for family to go back into slavery.
Mm.
Right? Now, you take that and you compare that kind of mindset and tenacity against a Section 8 law.
Mm.
And then I lay down, because there's a Section 8 law that says I can't have housing because I'm married.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you lay that on top of slavery that says my wife is a slave and I'm not. Right?
Yeah.
But he then says, okay, it's slavery, but I'm going in and I'm going to do what I have to do as a man. I'm going to do what I have to do in spite of, right, the whips, the chains, right? I'm going to do what I have to do with risk of getting to Texas and being sold off.
Yeah.
Right? So there was a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
But the idea that
Huge risk.
huge risk
Huge risk.
that he went against the system.
Mm-hmm.
But we have Section 8 laws, to your point and your comment, that says the husband can't be with the wife. And then so I lay down so that I can qualify for Section 8, rather than doing the things necessary to say, okay, bye-bye Section 8,
Right.
and then taking my wife and family based on my own tenacity and the forethought that I have to get an education, to get a job, or do what I have to do, pull my resources
Right.
with other Blacks in the community,
Yeah.
right? So when I look at this comparison between what slavery represented, less than human,
Yeah.
and what we were able to accomplish
Mhm.
versus what we have today in terms of laws and things of that nature, and not, there's a lot we have to get back to.
Wow. What about you? I mean, hearing this story.
So hearing the
gosh.
story, and hearing both of them, I'm thinking the slave master's son taught Jack how to read. He read the Bible. And I believe that it was his faith in God that led him to have the strength to go back into slavery, because he knew God was going to take care of him if he did what he was supposed to do.
Wow.
That God would give him the strength to do what needed to be done.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a lot of faith. I mean, it's a faith that I pray that I could tap into and whatnot. I mean, I have faith, but when you hear stories like that, I mean, could we today?
Yeah. That's
Would
what I'm
we
saying.
be willing to?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that was for his time. I don't know if I necessarily have the same strength. However, I think if we have the same education and knowledge and just recall all the things that God has done for us, then you'll know this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever the unknown is, whatever the next step, if God brought me to it, he already has it worked out. So let me continue to walk. and he'll keep revealing those next steps.
Yeah. See, I'm more of the Christmas addicts. You know, I'm more the John Brown. You know, I mean, you know, I'm like, you know, I just, oh man, I just know Jeffrey L. Boney. I just know I'm wired.
Right.
You know, I'm just like, you know, I'm going in like just. You know, I'm like, I'm going in like Django. But you know, it's so sobering to hear you share that story. And I mean, I'm sure there are other stories that you could share with us. But going back to the young people, man, what message do you want to share with our young people? You're overseeing or one of the on the board, vice chair of this Emancipation Park. Yes, we want to continue to lift up the legacy of this, but there's got to be a message that you want to share with our young people that, you know, it's probably either been bottled up with you or maybe you've said it enough, but, you know, you have a new listening audience right now to hear.
I think that to me, young people are really wonderful because you're able to kind of mold them and shape them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we give up too easily on them.
Yeah.
But I think that we have to work with them.
Yeah.
You know, I think we have to, as the young people nowadays, we have to mentor them. But we have to really work with them and share information and make them want to learn more. Because the more you share with them and help them to see different things, then they want to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
They want to learn more. So I think we have to spend more time sharing information with them, whether it's at school. Well, now school, that's only we could do what Governor Abbott says in schools these days.
Unless you vote him out. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day.
Right.
Although we can have that conversation now. Make sure you go vote no gun.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead.
Right. No, that's true though. That's true.
But with churches, I think churches could do a lot more in working with youth and helping them to understand what their story is, what their history is, and to kind of guide them on the paths of where they need to go. They have to know that people are interested in them and that you really care about them.
Yeah.
And I just believe that if they're taught their history and what they can do to improve their lives, and if they do the best they can, not just halfway do things. You know, we've gotten away from doing it well, doing whatever you're told to do it well.
Yes.
And if you do it well and you get an interest in something, I know that if you're truly interested and if you really learn what you need to learn, you can just about do anything you really want to do. And especially in a town like Houston. That may not be everywhere, but Houston is a place where people of all races, ethnicities can pretty much come if they are really interested in doing something. They're interested in learning how to build relationships. It's also about learning how to build relationships with other people, working with other people. If you teach a child that and they keep learning that lesson, they become interested in something, that they can learn how to work with the people they need to work with. The sky is really almost the limit in Houston for them.
You know, I think about a lot of the rich legacies of people who have done so much in Houston area after your great grandfather, did what he did, and those three gentlemen with him. But I just think about how some legacies have been squandered, and so much of what we've gained. You know, we didn't have internet and libraries, well, they did. You know, matter of fact, to this day, back in 1900, my great-great-grandfather actually acquired land, acres and acres of land in St. Augustine, Texas. And he had the wherewithal to not only acquire that land coming out of slavery, but also the mineral rights. You know, because there's two separate. You know,
Right.
And so you know, I remember several years back getting approached by this company. And my aunt, who's no longer with us, my aunt Jolene, she said, you know, hey, there's a lawyer that's trying to contact us, and it's about the land. It's about the land and the mineral rights. And, you know, primarily they were interested in the mineral rights, but there was potential for some oil. And so, you know, talking with them or whatever, my mom was deceased. And so, you know, we were just having dialogue, and they said, you know, we're interested in the mineral rights, and we're willing to give you X just to start drilling. And I was like, really? You know, I'm like, I mean, are you serious? And then, you know, they said that if we do find that we want to continue, then we'll pay you X amount of dollars per month for as long as we do it. And I was just tripping, because I was like, I went back and looked at all the paperwork, and the signature that my great grandfather had was just really an X.
Right.
Right. And that in 1900, this man with no formal education of any sort, coming out of slavery, was able to acquire acres,
35 years later,
acres and acres, hundreds of acres of land, and the mineral rights that now are benefiting me.
How about that?
120 years later. Plus.
How about that?
And he didn't have what I got, or what you got, or what you had the access to, internet and a master's degree and a doctorate.
He had you in mind, though.
Right.
He had you in mind.
They were always moving forward for the benefit of their children and grandchildren.
Right.
They were always, whatever they did, whatever those men did, it was for the benefit of the future generations.
And they didn't hold. They couldn't just live in the past.
No, they didn't know.
But that's where the squander piece comes in your original question around how those with legacy squandered, right? And to squander simply means just to waste, right? It just simply means to waste what you have. And your great grandfather and so many who was of that era was always about family first, but we talk about generational wealth.
Yeah.
Generational wealth to me doesn't equate necessarily to dollars.
Yeah.
But generational wealth is the mindset that I'm able to pass to my children and my children's children and my children's children's children. That's wealth in my mind.
Right.
And to squander that away, that is where a story of your own legacy and your own history is, to your word, squander. Yeah. To squander. Yeah.
And, you know, because I just look at some of the people that, you know, you hear about in Houston, and, you know, the things that they did, and I'm not singling out any particular one, but like people like Matt Hanna, and, you know, you know, and Dr. John B. Coleman, and just all of these, you know, stories and the stuff that they did and had, and it's just like, you know, you look now and it's like, wow, you know, like, you know, I want to create that type of legacy for my family, you know, and I feel like I have and am, but we're moving more in that direction. But I just, you know, it humbles me when I hear stories like what's been shared today, and just knowing, you know, I mean, I've done my due diligence as much as I can to learn about John Henry Jack Yates, because I went to the school, of course, and I told my mother, you know, she's not allowed to hear me here on camera, but she's up there. She knows. She already knows. You know, when I was zoned to Jones High School, because we moved to South Park. And I told her, I said, well, Mama, if I don't go to Yates, I ain't going to school. I'm just dropping out. If you don't let me go to Yates, if you don't let me go to Yates, I'm dropping out. So I ended up going to Dodson, Ride, and Yates. And I told her, I said, I gotta go to Yates. That's it, you know. So do you feel a lot of pressure? Y'all feel a lot of pressure, you know, knowing that you are the descendants of Jack Yates, to actually uphold that to a degree that puts a lot of pressure on you?
I don't know. I guess I've never really felt a lot of pressure, because, like I say, growing up as a child, I always knew that there were certain things I was going to do, certain things I wasn't going to do. And I was always going to try to work to share and help others. And so I just do that and do what I can, you know. And so I I don't feel like it's any pressure
Mm.
because I enjoy working with people.
Did you know that he would be revered in the way that he has become?
No, not when growing up, never had any idea, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you hear about your grandfather, we talked about him and different, but we never, you know, it was just family,
Yeah.
you know, just family talking.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anybody, it's just us talking.
Yeah. It's just us, right? What about you?
No, I'm like my mom. I don't feel any pressure. It's just you do what's been ingrained in you.
Mm-hmm.
I think I appreciate the respect that everyone has for him and recognizing his contribution. And I'm grateful to be a part of that legacy.
Absolutely. What about you?
You know, having married into, right?
Yeah.
I think what I love the most about my wife and my mother-in-law is their humility.
Mhm.
They would be in a room and you'd never know.
Mhm.
I think we dated for 2 years, almost 3 years before I even put 2 and 2 together, because she didn't say anything. They didn't. It's not a business card. Right? It's not a brooch that they wear on the lapel, right? But that speaks to a lot of their character, the family's character, right? The sisters, the cousins. You know, it's just not this broadcast of look at me, I'm this, I'm that. And having learned, and especially having become the senior pastor of Antioch, then I've come to really grow the humility and the humbleness that this family has in regards to what their great grandfather and great great grandfather has done for this community and this church. So yeah, for me, it's just just two humble ladies, who just live life, love people, and serve.
So I'll ask one final question, if I could. In your minds, and I'll go around. Since you just finished, we'll start with you. How important is legacy, and what legacy do you want to leave?
Great question. I remember, and like you, had a conversation with my mother, who is no longer on this earth. But we were having a conversation one day, and I said, Mom, to have been able to have given this life to live, and to not live some sort of mark to where you are remembered, what an awful waste of space. And when I look at my legacy, if there is such a thing, it would be one of service. I come from a service-oriented family myself, and the energy and the synergy that my wife have locked into that regard. I am a lover of people and a lover of the Lord, and my whole position would be one of service. And when we look at legacy, and I'll finish with this one, if your legacy is as far back as your mother and father and your grandfather and grandmother, that is okay. Tell that story, because as your family grows, so does your story grow. Don't worry about the great-great-greats and the great-great-greats. If you don't know that story and what country and what part of Africa you're from, look, I'm from Port Arthur, Texas. I can tell that story, right? Right? So
you went to Lincoln?
Jefferson. That's another story. But I went to PV. Right?
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. We're gonna leave that one right there and have another conversation. Right. But tell your story. If it's your grandmother, your grandfather, and that's all you got, tell that story.
Amen. I appreciate that, Pastor.
So at our house, in the driveway on the curb,
There's
a PV and TSU.
I tried to move us off of that. I tried.
Right. I wasn't there when they painted.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. You
So I love them just the same. But for me, legacy is important, and the reason it's important is so that young people know that the sons and daughters are kings and queens, and their ancestors' wildest dreams. And no matter what the world says about them, they can accomplish anything. And in us continuing to tell the story and the legacy of our people as a whole, not just any one person, but as our people, when they meet those trying times or doubtful moments, that will take them through it.
And your legacy.
Yeah. With my legacy,
What do you want your legacy?
I want to leave people better than what I found them.
Okay. Gotcha. Good. All right, Ms. Bostic. All eyes on you. Don't bring us home.
Oh, yeah. I think that all of us have a legacy, no matter what it is. We all have one. And hopefully, as some people say, the time between 1865 and 1897, that dash in between there, the dash is what's really important. That means, how did I spend my life? What did I do for others? How did I help others? How did I work with others? Was I cooperative? Or was I mean-spirited? I mean, what did I do with my life? And I certainly hope and pray that my legacy would be one in which others found that, as my daughter said, I left them. When I left them, they were much better than when I found them. Not because they were not good when I found them, because I left something with them that they could use and carry on their lives with.
Right.
Great.
Added
Awesome.
value.
Wonderful. These were great. I really appreciate you all. We have an event coming up, celebration wise, right? Some events, I'm sure. You want to talk about one of the main ones, some of the main ones?
Well, we're going to have quite a few events, but in the next week or so, for the 150th celebration of the Emancipation Park.
Okay.
We have been here for 150 years in this same spot.
Wow.
That is something to be very proud of.
Absolutely.
For all Houstonians.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to be having events, and on the 18th and 19th, there will be a number of events where there will be different artists that will be coming in. There will be programs. There will be all kinds of events. So
y'all got Frankie Beverly coming?
Yeah, we got Frankie. Ladies, how about that?
Ladies,
Oh,
yes.
Sheila E.
Sheila
Cool in the
E.
game.
Cool in the game?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, we have all
Diamond in the back.
Diamond in the top.
The scene with the
Gangsta Lane.
That's what's up.
In my Sunday church voice.
They got something for you too.
Right. They have a whole line.
They got a whole.
Now, when we have this line up with Sheila E., do we just do a church clap, or can we move our shoulders a
Well,
little bit?
what I was saying is, they got a whole.
Okay, certainly move the
Listen,
shoulders.
they got a whole church service day just for Pastor Luke.
Right.
Right.
Perfect.
But I need to be there too. We all need to be there. We all need to be there.
That's a little
Hallelujah.
word, Jeff, maybe 4 times he get. Look,
That's
look,
right. That's right.
Man, the closed mouth don't get fed, but
Right.
we definitely are excited to work with Emancipation Park Conservancy, and this has been so rich and so great and wonderful, man. I thank you all so much for being my guest today here on Real Talk. This is going to live in annals of history, and people are going to share this and go back to it. But I want to thank you all for tuning in to Real Talk Junkies on today. Make sure you go visit Pastor Lou McElroy over at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church. What's the address?
500 Clay Street, Sunday at 10:30.
All right, Sunday at 10:29.
Yeah.
Sunday at 10:29
Right.
That's right.
a.m.
Right.
All y'all club goers, not p.m. It's a.m. JJ. But at any rate, is there a website?
AMBCHouston.org.
AMBCHouston.org. And thank you so much, Ms. Jacqueline Bostic McElroy and Ms. Jacqueline Bostic. Man, I really appreciate you all, wealth of knowledge and history.
And we appreciate
You.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Providing this platform and just what you do in our community in the forward times.
Thank you so much.
You're a
man.
pillar in this community,
Thank
and
you.
so
Thank
we
you.
love the work you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh, yeah. Make sure y'all tune in next Wednesday, 12 noon Central Standard Time. I'll holler at you guys. Peace. Let's go.